ID-COOLING SE-914-XT-ARGB Budget CPU Cooler. This is the cooler we're talking about in today's video. I will be showing you how to install this on AM4 platform. Also, we got some temperature testing for this thing, see how it holds up against the other competitors and the price point this thing falls into. There will be timestamps in the description below. If there's a certain part of the video you'd like to jump to, you're more than welcome to do so. There's some other links down there that may interest you. Don't forget to do all that fun YouTube stuff on your way down to the description box. So without wasting all your time, let's flip you over here and I'll show you how to get this thing installed. Alright, to start this out, you need to dig out everything that you need for it. We got everything laid out here for the AM4 platform installation of the cooler. We have the cooler with the fan. We have the 4 screws that the installation guide says we're going to need. We got the 4 spacers. We have the 2 brackets that's going to mount to the motherboard. We have the thermal paste. As far as the tools go, I do have my number 2 Phillips. I do have an extension bit for my number 2 Phillips, which is both magnetized. And I do have my spreader over here for my thermal paste. So let's get into it. And unlike a lot of these coolers, we don't have nothing attached to the cooler right now. So we need to get the motherboard out of here. So let me get this stuff moved out of the way and we'll get the motherboard over here where we can get going. Here we are with the motherboard already prepped. We've got the NVMe hard drive in there. This is like if you was building it fresh out of the box. This next step, you know, if you have the air cooler, if you have a cooler already on your system, you'll have to remove it. If it's a fresh build, you'll have to remove these plastic mounting brackets. So let's go ahead and do that, which this is pretty simple. You just take the 4 screws out, got 2 on each bracket. Take the screws out and pull the brackets up off. I would recommend saving these brackets. You never know in the future, some aftermarket coolers and AIOs will take advantage of these brackets. So you definitely want to keep these brackets in screws because you never know what you're going to do in the future for cooling your CPU. So it's pretty important that you keep a hold of these. I would recommend, I usually just keep mine inside the motherboard box along with all the extra SATA cables and all that. Now keep them all in one spot, that way you know where everything's located. Okay, now we got the brackets off, or you got your CPU cooler off. On this AM4, they do use the back plate that's included on the motherboard. So you don't need that included back plate, that's only for Intel builds. Alright, since we got them brackets off now, we're going to go ahead and put the thermal paste on. There is different schools of thought on this. Some people say just put a drop in the middle, let the heat spreader spread it out. Me personally, I'm old school. I like to spread mine out. That way if I do put too much on, I can always take the excess off. And I also know I got good coverage. And we will be using the thermal paste for this application, because I have a feeling if you're buying this cooler new, you probably don't have a bunch of thermal paste laying around like I do. So we're going to go ahead and use what they supply us with. Take the cap off and drop it. Make sure you drop it or it don't count. Then you just take and put a dab there in the middle. And like I said, some people say you just leave it like this and let the spreader spread it out. I'm going to go ahead and start spreading it out here. And I will be back once I get it all spread out here where it's nice and thinly coated. Alright, now since we got the thermal paste on there, I think that's pretty good coverage. A little bit around the edges I didn't catch, but as the thermal paste heats up, it'll spread out and cover it. So I ain't too worried about it. I think it's pretty good application. Alright, we're going to have to take these little spacers here, these little plastic spacers, and put over top these notches. And over top these little posts sticking up from the back plate here. As far as your back plates go, or your brackets for your AM4, you got to make sure this little screw is sticking up. So there's only one way they can go on. By looking at the instructions, they go on this way. So one will be close to your RAM slots and the other one will be close to your heat sinks. So we'll go ahead and get these, get this here side started. When you put these on, you want to make, they are the C looking brackets. You want to make sure that they are pointed out away from the heat sink. You don't want to put them in like this because it covers up your CPU. You need to make sure that they're put over here this way. Let's see how we're going to get these things started here. And that's why I recommend a magnetic tip screwdriver. See if we can get it started here. Okay, that one's started. Get this one here started down in there. There we go. And since we got the other one already started, we'll go ahead and tighten this one down. You don't need these real tight, about wrist tight. What I say, you know, you really don't need to torque on them. You really don't, you know, you ain't stealing against water or air or nothing. But just about wrist tight. And we'll go ahead and come over here and pop the other side on. And you want to try to stop from getting in your thermal paste because you don't want to get that stuff all over everything. Get that side picked up here. Put that spacer back. Go ahead and snug that one side down. And we'll go ahead and snug this side down. Them feel about right to me. Pretty tight on there. We'll get the air cooler over here. We'll take the fan off of it, because you will have to take the fan off of it to get that front screw. Just like so. Pull the cabling off of it here. There's a sticker on the bottom of it. It says warning, remove before installation. So you want to definitely take that off. If you don't, your CPU will overheat. You know, you definitely want to make sure this ARGB cable for this is facing towards your RAM slots. That way it's close to your fan cable. And then just take it and screw it down on that screw that's sticking up. We'll get this side started a little bit here. Okay. And we'll jump over here to this side and we'll get this side started. There we go. Getting her started now. And this is where the 6-inch extension bit comes into play. It's awful nice when you tighten down these screws to have that extra room. Get this side tightened down some. Right around here we can see the second screw here. Then we'll tighten this side down some. And just like the main screws, you just want them a little snug. You don't really want them real tight. Just about wrist tight. Okay, that feels about right to me. And she's on there pretty good. Alright, then we need to put our fan back on here. Recommendations for the fan is try to keep the cables down towards this end. That way all your cables are coming off the same side. Line your fan back up here. And pull your brackets back, put them back on the heatsink. Just like so. Probably see this side a little bit better. Just kind of pull it back there and make sure it gets in that groove good. Now we're up to the cabling side of it. I kind of like that mounting system. It's pretty easy to mount. As far as the cabling goes, you do have a 4-pin PMW fan header here that needs to hook into your CPU fan, which you can see mine right here, the little gray one. It says CPU right above it there. Just turn it out, line up the notches, push it down on. There we go. Then you have the 2 regular ARGB headers here, one for the heatsink itself, and then one for the fan. Depending on your system and how much ARGB you have, you may need to hook these up differently. I have no other ARGB in this test system, so I'm just going to put one of them up here on this 3-pin 5-volt ARGB header up here. I'm going to line up the pins, push it down on, and slide them down on there. Alright, what I ended up doing, I ended up taking the 1 to 4-way splitter for the ARGB that comes in with the cooler, ARGB wires. It gave me a big clump of wires here. I just put a zip tie around. In your case, you can make this look a lot better by running them behind the motherboard tray than what I've done here. Which once I get the motherboard put in the system, I probably will do, just to make it look better. But let me get this thing put back in the system here, and I will run my test, and we'll be back and see how good this little cooler actually performs. Alright, I'll show you how to install this budget CPU cooler on the AM4 socket. Let's flip you over here. We'll run down through the components to make up today's test bed. First on the chopping block, we have the AMD Ryzen 5 5600G. This is the CPU, and we did use the iGPU in this particular CPU for today's testing. That is mounted on the Gigabyte B550M DS3H motherboard. We do have G-Skilled Ripjaws 5 series, 16 gigs, around 3600 megahertz and dual channel. The storage, we have Silicon Power 512 gigabyte NVMe SSD. And to power the whole system, we have the EVGA 500 BA100, which is an 80+ bronze certified non-modular power supply. And for the case, we have the Fractal Design Focus G Black. Talking about the case, I did leave the 2 pre-installed fans in the front of it. I did add an extra one to the back, that way we could have an exhaust fan. As far as the components go in this system, everything is ran in stock. Besides the XMP profile on the RAM, I did go in and enable that. Everything else is ran in stock. So the CPU and the iGPU both are running the out-of-box settings. The way I do the testing on these, I do run Cinebench R23 for a half-hour stress test with Heaven benchmark in the back, looping. And I do run the test 3 different times to come up with the maximum and the average. And then I take the average of what them 3 test results equal up to. If I run these tests like this 3 different times and taking the averages, I believe it takes up any of the inconsistencies, or because the thermal paste wasn't properly installed right, or it didn't have time to thin out like it should. I think this is a pretty good way to run these tests. Alright, I'll show you how to install this on the AM4 platform. We ran down through the components that make up the system. And I also broke down how I do my testing and why I do the testing the way I do. So how does this thing compare? let's flip you over and we'll look at the nice little chart I got together for you. Alright, by looking at the numbers, the black is going to be the maximum temperature, the orange is going to be the average temperatures, the Wraith Stealth, which comes with the 5600G, the max was 95.6, the average was 93.3. The Shadow Max cooler, we hit a max of 80.8, and the average was 78.7. The Aigo P6, we had a max of 74.4 and the average of 70.8. The Vetroo V5, the max was 71.1, the average was 68.9. The Se-914-XT-ARGB was a max temperature of 70.9, the average was 67.4. The Hyper T4 had a max temperature of 69.8, the average of 67.7. By looking at them numbers, you can tell, even though this is only a little 92mm fan, it is a smaller heatsink. It holds toe-to-toe with even the 120 heatsinks that's out there. By looking at the numbers, you know, if you take the top 4 of them, they're within a degree or two different. I think that is in the margin of error. So this thing will actually stand up against some of the bigger air coolers that's out there. It's within this price range. I mean, this ain't putting it against a $50 or $60 air cooler. Air coolers in this price point, I don't think you can go wrong with this cooler. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up there for you if you'd like to go watch it. I do have an unboxing and where I break down the stats of it or the specs of it, tell you what the cooler offers you. In that video, I was pretty impressed with the build quality of this cooler. After getting it tested and seeing how good it actually performs, even though it's a smaller fan than the rest of the coolers on this list pretty much, I think it holds its own. I think it's pretty good. In the original video, I said I didn't know how it would look inside of a full-size case or a micro ATX case. And by looking at the pictures here, this little video clip I got of it, I don't think it looks too bad. It is a little bit shrunk down compared to everything else in the system, and of course it'd look better if you had a little bit bigger air cooler in there. But I think it looks pretty good. And with the numbers that we've seen today, for the price of the cooler, I don't think you could go wrong with it. I really enjoyed the mounting system of it. I think a lot of CPU coolers could actually take this mounting system and make their products even better. In the main video where I did take it out of the box, I did say that, you know, I think it's made mainly for a mini ITX build because it is so small and so compact. I still think that's true. For the money of this cooler, I don't think you can go wrong by getting it. It definitely outperforms the stock heatsink, and it's only about $37, $38 a day that's filming, which is January of 2022 here. If you'd like to have more information or you'd like to pick one of these little coolers up, there will be links in the description below. Maybe some other links down there that may interest you. Don't forget to do all that fun YouTube stuff on your way down that description box. You all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.